There once was a kingdom unlike any other. It was rich, powerful, and admired by everyone who visited it. From the outside, it looked like a place where justice ruled above everything else. But behind its magnificent walls lived a king whose idea of justice was unlike anything the world had ever seen. The king believed that people could never be trusted to judge one another fairly. Judges could be bribed. Witnesses could lie. Even the truth could be twisted. But there was one thing, he believed, that could never be corrupted. Fate. If fate decided a person's future, then no one could accuse the king of being unfair. So, at the heart of his kingdom, he built a massive arena. Thousands of people gathered there whenever someone was accused of a serious crime. It wasn't just a trial, it was the kingdom's greatest spectacle. In the center of the arena stood two identical doors. Behind one waited a starving tiger. Behind the other stood a beautiful young woman chosen by the king himself. The accused had only one choice. Open one of the doors. If the tiger appeared, everyone accepted that fate had declared him guilty. If the young woman stepped out instead, he was declared innocent. And married to her immediately, right there in front of the cheering crowd. It didn't matter if he loved someone else. It didn't matter if she loved someone else. The king believed fate had already made the perfect decision. The people called it justice. Others quietly called it madness. But no one dared challenge the king. Because in his kingdom, questioning justice was treated like questioning fate itself. The king had one daughter. She was beautiful, intelligent, and admired throughout the kingdom. But she had inherited more than her father's royal blood. She had inherited his fierce heart. When she cared for someone, she loved with her whole soul. When she hated someone, she rarely forgave. Most people saw only her kindness. Very few noticed the fire that burned beneath it. Then, one day, she fell in love. Not with a prince. Not with a nobleman. Not with a wealthy lord. She fell in love with a young courtier. He had no title. No fortune. Nothing that should have attracted a princess. But love has never cared much about status. He was kind. Quiet. Honest. The kind of person who listened more than he spoke. Whenever he entered a room, he never tried to become the center of attention. Yet somehow, people's eyes always found him. Including hers. Their love began quietly. A few conversations became long walks through the palace gardens. Long walks became secret meetings beneath moonlit balconies. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they said nothing at all. Because when two people truly understand each other, silence can speak louder than words. For months, they believed no one knew. But palaces have a way of collecting secrets. Servants notice small things. Guards remember unusual meetings. Rumors travel through stone walls faster than footsteps. Soon, whispers spread through every hallway. The princess was in love. And eventually, those whispers reached the king. Everyone expected him to explode with anger. Instead, he smiled. It was a calm smile. The kind that frightened people more than shouting ever could. He looked at the young courtier only once before giving a single command. The arena. That was enough. No trial. No discussion. No second chance. The young man would stand before the two doors. The princess begged her father to spare him. She reminded him that the young man had committed no crime except loving her. The king listened patiently. Then he answered with complete confidence. If his heart is innocent, fate will save him. To the king, that sounded like justice. To the princess, it sounded like a death sentence. News of the trial spread across the kingdom. Merchants stopped working to discuss it. Travelers changed their journeys just to witness it. People argued about which door they would choose if they were standing in the young man's place. To everyone else, it was another day of entertainment. To the princess, it was the day she might lose the man she loved forever. But unlike everyone else, she refused to leave his future to chance. She knew the palace better than anyone. She knew who could be trusted. She knew who could be persuaded. And she knew that even the strongest loyalty sometimes disappeared when enough gold changed hands. Quietly, without her father's knowledge, she began searching for the truth. Night after night, whispers echoed through dark corridors. Coins passed from one hand to another. Promises were made. Risks were taken. Until finally, she discovered the secret. She learned exactly which door concealed the tiger. And which door concealed the lady. For the first time since the king's judgment, hope returned. She could save him. All she had to do was guide him toward the correct door. But before she could celebrate, she learned something else. Something that shattered every certainty she had. The woman waiting behind the second door was someone she already knew. Young. Beautiful. Graceful. The princess had noticed her before. She remembered the way the young woman smiled whenever the courtier passed by. The way her eyes seemed to follow him through crowded hallways. At the time, those moments had seemed unimportant. Now they became impossible to forget. Had the young woman loved him too? Had he ever noticed her? Had they ever exchanged feelings the princess had never seen? She had no answers. Only questions. And questions have a dangerous habit of growing louder in the middle of the night. That evening, the princess stood alone beside her window, looking down at the empty arena. Workers prepared the sand for tomorrow's trial. The two doors stood quietly beneath the moonlight. Tomorrow, an entire kingdom would believe fate was making the choice. But fate no longer held the answer. She did. And for the first time in her life, she realized that knowing the truth could be far more painful than living without it. Because now she wasn't asking herself which door hid the tiger. She already knew. The question that haunted her was far more terrifying. If saving the man she loved meant watching him spend the rest of his life with another woman, could she truly call that a victory? Or would that become a different kind of loss? One that never ended? She remained awake until sunrise. And as the first light touched the walls of the arena, the impossible decision waiting for her had only become heavier. Tomorrow, with nothing more than the movement of one hand, she would decide the future of the man she loved. And perhaps, the future of her own soul. Morning arrived. The sun rose over the kingdom just as it always had. The streets filled with people. Merchants opened their shops. Children laughed. Soldiers took their positions. To everyone else, it was just another day. But for the princess, it was the day her heart would be put on trial. She hadn't slept. Every hour of the night had been spent asking herself the same impossible question. At first, the answer seemed obvious. If she truly loved him, she had to save his life. Isn't that what love is? Wanting someone to live even if life takes them far away from you. She imagined him walking toward the correct door. The heavy wooden door would slowly open. No tiger. Only the young woman waiting inside. The crowd would explode with joy. Trumpets would echo across the arena. The king would smile proudly, believing fate had once again delivered justice. Within moments, the young man would be declared innocent. Then, without being asked, his hand would be placed into another woman's hand. A wedding would begin immediately. Not because either of them had chosen it, but because the king believed fate had already chosen for them. He would leave the arena alive. But from that moment on, he would no longer belong to her. The princess tried to accept that future. She told herself it was enough that he survive. She repeated those words again and again. If he lives, that is enough. But every time she closed her eyes, another future appeared. She saw them walking together through the palace gardens where she and the young courtier had once met in secret. She imagined hearing his laughter, a laughter she would never again be the reason for. She imagined years passing. A home. A family. Children. Growing old together. She imagined watching all of it from a distance, knowing she had saved the man she loved, only to give him to someone else forever. The thought was unbearable. Then another voice quietly rose inside her heart. A voice she wished had never existed. If he cannot be yours, why should he belong to anyone else? She hated the thought. It frightened her. Because for the first time, she saw something of her father inside herself. The same fierce pride. The same unwillingness to lose what belonged to her. She had always believed she was different from him. Now, she wasn't so sure. Perhaps love and jealousy were never as different as people like to believe. Perhaps jealousy was simply love. Afraid of disappearing. By noon, the arena was overflowing. Thousands of people filled the stone seats. Some had traveled for days just to witness another trial. To them, it was entertainment. To the king, it was justice. Only two people understood what was truly happening. The princess, then the young man standing at the center of the arena. The king took his place upon the royal platform. The crowd stood and cheered. Beside him, the princess sat in complete silence. No one noticed how tightly her hands were clenched. No one noticed the fear hidden behind her calm expression. Then the great gates opened. The young courtier walked into the arena. His chains had been removed. There was no need for them. There was nowhere to run. He walked slowly across the sand until he reached the center. For a moment, the entire arena fell silent. Then he looked up. He didn't look at the king. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at the princess. Their eyes met. In that single moment, every memory they had ever shared seemed to return. The moonlit gardens. The whispered conversations. The stolen smiles. The promises they had never dared to speak aloud. He knew she had discovered the secret. He trusted her completely. Without saying a single word, he asked her the only question that mattered. Which door? The princess felt her heart pounding. This was the moment she had feared all night. One simple gesture would decide everything. Slowly, almost unwillingly, she raised her right hand. The crowd didn't understand what she was doing. But the young man did. Without hesitation, she pointed toward the door on the right. He didn't question her. Not for a second. If there was one person in the world he trusted, it was her. He nodded gently, then turned toward the door. Every step echoed across the silent arena. The crowd leaned forward. Some hoped for the tiger. Others hoped for the wedding. The king watched with quiet satisfaction. The princess never looked away. The young man reached the door. He placed his hand on the handle. For one final moment, he turned back. Their eyes met again. No words. No tears. Only trust. Then, he pulled the door open. And that is where the story ends. We never hear a roar. We never hear wedding bells. The writer, Frank R. Stockton, stopped the story at that exact moment. Readers begged him for the answer. For years they asked him the same question. Which door did she choose? He never told them. Because he believed the answer wasn't hidden behind the door. It was hidden inside the princess. And perhaps, inside every one of us. Would love be strong enough to let someone live even if it meant losing them forever? Or would jealousy whisper that death is easier than watching the person you love belong to someone else? There is no official answer. There never has been. Some people believe the princess chose the lady because real love sacrifices. Others believe she chose the tiger because she had inherited her father's fierce and possessive nature. Both answers reveal something about the princess. But they reveal something about us as well. Maybe that was the writer's true intention. Not to ask what the princess chose, but to ask what we believe she chose. Because our answer says as much about our own hearts as it does about hers. Perhaps the arena never disappeared. Perhaps every one of us stands before two invisible doors at different moments in life. One door asks us to choose love. The other asks us to choose pride. Sometimes they look exactly the same. And only after we make our choice do we discover what was waiting behind the door. That is why this story has survived for nearly a century and a half. Not because of its ending, but because it refuses to give us one. The young man opened the door. The princess lived with her choice. History remained silent. And now, the silence belongs to you.